Hello everyone, welcome to today's office hours. Share my screen. Boom, boom. All right, so today, hello, I'm Tejas. Today we're doing, here's our office hours. Here's 5 social medias, go make sure to check them out. And so in today's office hours, I'll be introducing the course and the exam. And I'll go over Unit 1 and have time for Q&A. So about me. So hi, I'm Tejas. I'm a senior from the Bay Area in California. I took AP CSA last year and I got a 4 on the exam, so I do know the content. And so if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. All right, and so about this course. So this is a class that's, my teacher from last year said this, and it's a really good quote for this class. But it's a class that there are some concepts in this class that will take you a while to learn, and there were some for some students, and there will be some that it'll take you only like a second, and for others it might be the opposite. And so that's the thing about this class. It's not like other classes where there's like a set like answer or there's like a set way to do something. There are an infinite amount of ways to do something, to learn, to how you do this course. It's like all dependent on you. And so that's something unique to this course. And so that is something that, like, if this is your first AP exam, this is not going to be the same experience as other, if this is your first AP class, this is not the same to other AP classes, like the experience it will be. And so about the exam, so the exam is, is 2 portions. You have the multiple choice and the free response. And so multiple choice is 50% of your score. And so you may be asked for what code does, or you'll be given sample code and you have to say what certain portions of this code does, what's the correct format for certain certain blocks of code, or what will be the error in this block of code, where will the first error occur. So those are some examples for the multiple choice. And then for the free response, you have 4 questions, and you will be asked to code, like write it out, but you'll be asked to create code that does certain tasks. And so on the CED, they've also listed exactly what each question is. So question 1 will be about class and call statements, so expressions, iteratives, and conditional statements. And question 2 are about classes. Question 3 is about arrays and array lists. And question 4 is about 2D lists, or two-dimensional arrays. So using this, essentially this covers all the stuff in the class. And so, but you know exactly what areas you need to focus on. So let's get started right into Unit 1. So that is primitive types. So we're going to start with two basic important things that you'll need to know. Is that when you want to print out something, you'll use system.out.print and system.out.println, and a string is enclosed in double quotes. And so the difference between system.out.print and system.out.println is with the extra ln, that stands for line, what happens is if you use this, after it prints out whatever you want to display, so after here you'll put a parentheses and then you'll be able to put in exactly what you want it to print. So you'll be, with ln, that makes a new line after it's printed that out. So if I go over to here to an IDE that I've set up, so if I do system, public class main, okay, we love this, thank you. All right, let me just open up an older project, open recent. Okay. So here's just some code, and I can open this. And just start to. Here we've got a public class main, and here we go. Here. Let's make this main, and we don't need any arguments to go in. So this is what your classes and your different functions look like. So I can get rid of this. It will interrupt it. Okay, go. And so what's happened here is that I've created a class called main. And so under that, I've created a function that's also called main, and I've given this type int. So that means it's going to return that it expects to return an int statement. And so right now it's giving me an error because I've not given it a return int statement. So I could make that a string. Keep in mind, string starts with a capital S, and so it asks me for a string. So let's say I want it to print out a line. So we can print out. Here we go. System.out.print print line, and let's say hello. And then we can give it another system. Give another. Make sure we have parentheses at the end. And here we could say world. And so here, without doing the ln, and then so if I do another printout, I'm just going to print out the number 1. What happens is when I compile this, it's going to give me an error because I still haven't done a return. So I'll do a return. Just return test. There we go. So what happens is when I go right-click here, string main. So I've run this individual functions. What happens is it creates this window right here. And so what happens is, first off, we get that this function here return main test, this is useful when you have certain functions, like where you start simplifying and creating programs that have more than one functions. So you have one function that does one specific task. So later on, what you do is like you can call that function to do something, and then it returns that value, and then that value you can assign to a variable without knowing that individual value. And so that's what the usefulness of return is, but here we don't need it. Here we had it print out hello, and then create a new line. That's why we used ln. And then we had it print world and 1. So the why I used 1 is to show you that it would not create a new line. And so when it printed out, it said hello, create a new line, and then world 1. Does not include a space. If you want to include a space, you have to include that beforehand. So then if I compile and string main, now it has that space. Okay, back to primitive types. Now let's talk about variables. So a type is a set of values. So here we go. So this type is a set of values that has a domain and a set of operations on them. So a domain can be an integer, int, a string, etc., like a Boolean, which is like true or false, and also like set of operations. So assigning it something, doing a math to it or something. And so and so what happens is you have 2 types of data types. They're categorized as primitive or reference. So primitive data types in this class will be used for operations of numbers and Boolean values. So numbers and true/false. And so a literal is the source is a fixed value. Right? So that's another important fact. And so what happens is when you have expressions you're going to be using 2 types of values. You'll be using ints and doubles. So a double is something that has a decimal. And so the operations you do it are plus, minus, multiplication, which is done by the star, and division, which is done by the division. And you've also, division is done by the slash. And then you've got, if you use the percent symbol, you're doing something called integer division, where you're only using the integers. And so that's something a bit more complex, and we can break it down later on. So if you have 2 integers and you divide them, you will come out with an integer. If you will always be in the same typeset. So you can always, like, let's say this, you have 3.2 divided by 3, right? That will give you, like 3.3 divided by 3, right? That will give you 1.1. So that's a double. So what you can do is you can divide a double by an integer and get a double. But you cannot divide an integer by a double and get an integer. Right? It will have to be in that double format. So those are just different things. And so what happens is, why are there different things called integers and doubles? And so this starts back when computers had very small amounts of memory, small amounts of cache in their computers. And so what happens is you would only have small amounts of data. Like you would have to making sure like your code had to be really small. Like keep in mind the computer that ran Apollo 11, that was less than 1 gigabyte. And now we have games that are like 200 gigabytes. And so what happens is, because computers have gotten so better, like we haven't need to use this. But if you're asked a question that says that, you have to limit, like, you have to make it take as much smaller space as possible, then wherever you can use an integer, because an integer takes less space on a computer than a double. And so and make sure you still normal math terms still take effect, so you cannot divide something by 0, you'll get an error. So after that, right, now that's kind of variables. Is there anything else? Yeah, so int, doubles, booleans, right? Each value takes a different amount of memory on your computer. And so that's why there are different values for doubles and ints. Let's see, when a variable is declared final, so if you have like final int x equals blank, that number, whatever that variable is, it cannot be changed ever again. Okay, so now we have operators. And so what happens is, let's go down here. Okay, so operators, so we have 3 different types of operators. We have assignment, compound assignment, and casting. So assignment operators are as like an equal. So when you do int x equals blank, you're using the assignment operator to assign the variable x to whatever value you set it to. And so that's an assignment operator. But a compound assignment operator is like plus equals, or minus equals, or multiplication equals. So you do, or like plus plus and minus minus. So plus plus will take your value and you add 1, or minus minus will subtract 1. So you don't have to do like x equals x minus 1. You can just do x plus plus. And so if I go here and I do, let's make this, we'll make it an int. So if we do x equals 3, and so if we do x plus plus and return x, compile that. Oh wait, I have to do int. Compile that, and main, it will return 4. This is much simpler than doing x equals x plus 1. It does the same thing in the end. Let's close it. Okay, so back to here. So we have different assignment operators. Those are plus equals 2, minus equals 2, multiplication equals 2, division and integer division. And so those are 2 things in one operation. So it's called a compound assignment operator, because you're still assigning a value to it. Next, we have a casting operator. So those are ints and doubles, but it's a bit different. So in here, you're creating a temporary int. So if I did something like this, I'll return this, I'm gonna do int. So int x equals 3. And I did int x plus 0.5. This is a casting. You are casting the int onto the x, but it's already an int, so we can't do anything here. So if I make this a double, now I have temporarily casted x as a double. And so if I return x, what's going to happen is, okay, not a statement. Let's see. No, it'll still say not a statement. Is it not like really things? Let's say if I make this a double and I want to return a double. Oh, wait, okay, so usually, here's the thing. So usually you use something like this in context of other things. And so you'll have like a larger function. And so what happens is, let's say you are like when you're dealing with arrays or like sets of data, and you want to return it as something else, like a string. That's when you would cast it. Or like when you're dealing with multiple classes. So it won't be in stuff like this, but it'll be in a different class, like cookies or something else. And so because you need to access something in the cookies class, you'll temporarily access it as cookies. And so you'll use it in context of other things and have like more stuff before and after it. And so in this case, we don't have that, and that's why it's giving me an error. So this is just something for you to know for much later. It's a type of operator, but you won't use this till later on in the year. Okay, so now you can get the value of an int. So integer values are represented by type int, which takes 4 bytes of memory. And so what happens is an int value has to, there's like an int value has to be in range from int max and int min. That's just another tidbit, but that's still like back to bytes and all that. So there's something called the integer limit. And so you cannot have a value greater than the integer limit. And so otherwise there would be an error called an overflow error. So unit 1 is pretty simple. Here it's just the basics. And so that's honestly it. Once we get later on, we'll have much longer office hours. You'll have breakdown. You'll have a lot more stuff to go over. It'll take a lot longer to explain everything. But in this case, there's not much. So it's to Q&A. So does anyone have any questions?
Can you explain casting again?
Okay, yes, so casting. So casting is still like something you'll be using later on. So let's say this, I have a class, another class. So I'm just gonna delete this, right? I have a new class, I'm gonna call it cookies. And so let's say I'm making a program that it wants to know, wants to see how much money a bakery makes in a year. And so what I do is I have a class called cookies. So in this class called cookies, which I've got to change the name, that's another thing. So the class right here that you create has to say a public class here. And so what happens is, let's say I want to make a program that calculates how much money a bakery makes. So let's say the bakery sells cookies, cakes, and donuts, okay? And so let's say I have 3 separate classes called cookies, cakes, and donuts. And so what I do is, let's say in these cookies, there's different types of cookies, like that. So in the class cookies, I have individual functions that, calculate the cost to, if I tell you, okay, I sold this many cookies this year, or I'm buying the raw ingredients for this many cookies this year, and I get this many customers on here. And this is how many, and let's say everyone buys 1 cookie, right? And one person buys this, one person buys that, and I want to calculate how much money I make. So in this cookies class, I can create functions that apply only to the cookies. So I can create something by the type cookie, and I can say, okay, and figure out and do any functions or anything I have to do with that cookie, I can do in this individual class. But let's say I'm in the main class and I need to do something in the cookies class. The cookies class will require something by the type cookie. But in the main class, I don't have that because I'm in the main class. So what I can do is cast it as type cookie. So essentially telling the computer, saying, yes, this is a cookie. Even though it's not, it makes the computer think it's a cookie and let those individual interactions inside the cookies class occur. So let me find an example project where I did this. Let's try Gizmo. Did I do this? Nope. Project recent. So this is still much later when you have more than 1 class. Let's see. Did I do anything here? No. None in here. So while I'm finding the office, while I'm trying to find an example, does anyone else have any other questions? Let me see, I should have an example. Okay, so here's an example of where I'd use this. So I've gotten a program here, and it's got 3 classes. So I've got the classes dictionary, ArrayList, and main. And so what happens is, see here, okay? So I've got an int, so here we go. So here we have the dictionary class, because like here I'm trying to create a dictionary. So in main, I give in the words, and then it fills the dictionary. And so here is my dictionary class, and here's my ArrayList, because this is an example using ArrayList. So an ArrayList is kind of like an array, but it's a bit different. Instead of being an actual like thing in Java, it's an own class that you import. So as you can see, or like it's its own individual package. So here we imported scanner, which is just something to create random digits. Or sorry, scanner is something to get user input. And so here we go. We're going to get a random flashcard. So that means in our dictionary of list of words, we're going to get a random value. So we call, what we do is here is we take the word, like we have words, and words is an array list, right? So it's type array list, right? And so what happens is when we use words.size, we get the size of the array list. And what we do is we multiply it by math.random. But this is type array list, and this is a value, and it's an int. We can't multiply those. So what we do is when we cast int to it, we are making the computer think the value that we get, we're setting these to ints, and so that we are able to do these functions, these equations to them, because otherwise we wouldn't. We would get an error because it wouldn't be the correct type. And so that's a scenario where you'd cast something. But as I said, this is still something later on in the year that you will learn. So any other questions? Alrighty, if that's it, thank you guys all for coming, and I'll see you guys next time.